Sarah Mallory, she's actually my sister-in-law. Right now she's in Idaho, but she comes from the Great Plains of Ohio. She's a backcountry wilderness river rafting guide. She does multi-day treks through Idaho. I've yet to be on one. I'm really sad because I'm very excited to actually get to experience one with her. But I'm really excited to hear more about how she balances her seasonal job and then her small business as well, her leather company. So, Sarah, please take it away. Give a better intro than I did even.
No, that was great. I have nothing to add. The end. No.
Nope.
Yeah, so my name is Sarah. Thank you so much, Maria. I'm excited to be here with you guys and talk a little bit about working as a river guide, as Maria mentioned. So I work as a multi-day guide, traditionally in land that has belonged to and belongs to currently the Shoshone Bannock and Nez Perce people. For those who maybe don't know that area, that's Idaho. So I guide there in the summer times, and I also own my own small business. So I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about what it feels like to balance the seasonal working life. Yeah, I talk with my hands a lot of knife hands. So if that's super distracting to you, then you could just maybe put like a little piece of tape over top of me so you can't see me do that. But you can expect lots of hand motions today. So just from like get a general feel, who here has either drop it in the chat or like nod your head if your video's on, or raise your hand. Who here has been on a river trip before? For a lot of folks, that may look like a white water, like 2 hour kind of experience. For some folks, I see some names I recognize. I know they basically live on the river. And for those of you who have maybe not been on a river trip, I'm sure you can kind of like create an idea in your mind's eye of like what that looks like, right? What you envision that being. So I want you to take a moment and just envision with me, okay? You drive up to this sandy landing that's along the banks of a crystal clear river. You're standing at a place called Corn Creek. It's the launching spot of the main salmon river. It's a free-flowing river that runs through the backcountry, the wilderness of Idaho. And you're looking downstream, and all of the world of possibilities are in front of you. You're about to start your 6-day river trip in the backcountry of Idaho. So you're about to step into 6 days with no cell service, no access to technology, kind of, and with a bunch of people some people that you know and some people that you don't know. So you are one of the guides. You are working with 5 other folks. You know all of the other guides on your crew. There's about 20 or so guests. Some folks know each other, some don't. There's some kids, there's some adults. The kids are super fun. The adults are super, super chill. And you can just like kind of tell from like day one that everybody's gonna get along really well and everybody's really nice. And you're just like, okay, I'm feeling really good about this. The crew is like absolutely fantastic. There's like the one guide, Krista, who plays her ukulele like around the campfire to the guests in the evening, and then she'll like play her ukulele on the boats as you like fall asleep under the stars. There's the paddle boat guide. He is like so energetic and so fun, and it's just like a total like the kids just like love him. Everybody gets along really well. Like late into the evening, you like hang out with your crew and you're like drinking whiskey and like, watching the stars and like staying up all night and like laughing. And you stay at the best camps, you go hiking, you swim in the river, you cliff jump, you play games. And on the final afternoon, so the 6th day, right, of 6 days together with this group of 25 people, it's just been totally dreamy. You go around in a circle and you talk about the highlight of the trip and the low light of the trip, and like, you know, the ways that you've like grown over 6 days. And full grown like adult men have like tears in their eyes, and they're like, this was the best trip ever. Like, this changed my family's life. This was the best trip ever. And as a guide, you're like, this was the best trip ever. And you have said that before and you felt that before, but like in that moment, like it really is like, this is the best trip ever. Okay, so that's the first scenario. The next scenario, same exact place. You're at Corn Creek. You're looking downstream, main salmon river flowing down there, all the possibilities in the world, 6 days in the backcountry, you know, no cell service, no technology. And you push off of the shore and it starts to rain. And then it rains and then it keeps on raining. And it's just like nonstop rain. And you get to camp and you're setting up camp in the rain, and your guests are setting up their tents in the rain, cooking dinner in the rain. And you're like, okay, it'll stop tomorrow. And then it doesn't stop tomorrow. And then on the second day, you're like, it'll definitely stop on the third day. And the third day, it hasn't stopped. And then on the third evening, you're pulling into camp again, and you're setting up the rain tarp again, trying to like cook chicken, and your coals won't stay lit because, you know, everything is wet and folks don't even want to eat anyways because they're kind of cold and miserable. And oh, also you're the paddle boat captain. And so you have to convince people to get into your paddle boat, the wettest boat on the trip every day. You have to convince them that yes, they want to be more wet than they already are. And on that third night, you go to bed and you crawl into your like sandy, damp sleeping bag with your sandy, damp puffy, and you look up at your tent that's like also dripping, because even like modern technology and modern materials can only do so much. And you're like, it's never going to stop raining. I'll never be dry again. So I have been on both of those trips. And for the record, it did stop raining and then the sun came out and it was like the best day ever. You know, that was also the best trip ever. Yeah, that's kind of, you know, how it feels to be that's what it looks like to be a river guide. So a little background for you. You know, I am from rural Ohio, and I didn't always find it to be my calling to be, you know, sleeping in the rain. Instead, I came from, you know, very, very modest, modest roots, where I did a lot of like my outdoor experience was like climbing trees and playing softball and swimming in our pond and like, you know, like raising chickens and showing them at the like county fair with my brother, like normal, mild outdoor stuff that like everybody does. Right. And when I went to school in Cincinnati, where I studied design, and I kind of fueled my like love for like new experiences by like traveling as much as I could and doing study abroad and doing internships all in different parts of the country. And so the way that my school was structured was I would do a semester of class, a semester of internship for 5 years. So I was every 4 months, I was uprooting my life, packing my bags, packing my car, and moving into, you know, a new apartment or moving into a new city. And I found that I actually really, really loved that transient sort of lifestyle. And I was actually pretty good at it. It was actually during one of those internships that I became friends with somebody who I now guide with. She was the first one to turn me on to the idea of working as a river guide in Idaho. And I reached out to my now manager, and I was persistent, and I had a couple of interviews, and the next thing I knew I had a job. And then the next thing I knew I was driving the like, you know, I graduated college, drove the like 36 hours across the country to go be a river guide in Idaho. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I'm pretty good at being bad at things, which is quite the endearing quality. And I got out there and I had the best summer of my life. And that kind of changed it all for me. So I am now going into my 7th year working as a professional multi-day whitewater river guide. Alongside that, I'm also a small business owner. I make leather goods and other creative this and that's. And you could say I'm quite experienced in the nomadic seasonal lifestyle. And for those of us who are actively living it right now, I think the more accurate term sometimes feels like I'm really good at being a mess, you know? So you can find me here if you so care to follow along on any or none of my journeys. Yeah, so let's think about, so like seasonal and part-time work. There's a lot of different ways to do that type of work. The way I kind of like to think about my lifestyle is that, you know, over here you have the traditional 9 to 5, where you're based out of one place, and, you know, we can all kind of envision that. We probably have all worked that job, or we can all envision that scenario, right? And then over here, there's this like chunk of living where self-employed meets part-time meets seasonal meets gig work meets like maybe just like flexible work schedules. And there's a lot of different ways to be a seasonal worker. I would argue, maybe some people would not agree with me, but I would say that even like being a teacher or like a college student, you're kind of like part-time. You're not part-time, you're full-time part of the time, part-time, full-time. Anyways, so you have a chunk of time where you can do with as you please. Obviously, there's a lot of different types of examples. I'm going to talk about being a river guide. That's what I do. So what type of guiding do I do? I work multi-river trips in Idaho. So when I asked earlier, like, can you envision what it looks like envision a whitewater experience, or think about a whitewater experience you've been on. Most of you likely thought about sharing a paddle boat with, you know, 5 other people, with the guide at the back who's kind of hollering orders to you, and you're going through really intense rapids, and it's very high adrenaline and high energy, and for about 3 hours. You meet the guide in the morning, you have your adventure, you say goodbye, and you never see those people in that boat ever again. So think about that, and then take it down a notch, and then take that same level of energy and spread it out over 6 days, right? So that's kind of what multi-day river trips look like. If you aren't super familiar with them, I kind of like to think about them as like whitewater meets camping. So we take multiple types of crafts on a trip. So paddle boat that you initially think of, but we also take these really large boats that have these metal frames on them, and they're meant for carrying a bunch of gear. And in that gear, we take the full camp setup. We take multiple tables. We have chairs for everybody. We have everybody's tents. We have everybody's sleeping bags. We have giant coolers full of like fresh vegetables and like steaks and like fish. We have musical instruments. You have anything that you could possibly want on this trip. Multi-day trips can go from 30 miles long to 220 miles long or more. The Grand Canyon, right? That's a trip that I've worked a handful of times. We go 220 miles, and we're down there for about 15. And that's so everything that you need for those 15 days, for those 220 miles, you have on day 1. You go all the way with that. So, you know, you're moving through these super remote landscapes. You're, like I said, taking everything with you. There are not established campsites. There's no picnic tables or bathroom system. You take the bathroom system with you on the boats. We leave no trace when we stay at these places. Multi-day trips they're really about like settling and enjoying your time out there with whoever's out there with you. So it's like, it's leisurely sometimes. And the kids are the ones who kind of make it all happen. They have a lot of they have a lot of different qualities to them. Obviously, first and foremost, they're huge advocates for the spaces that they're going through. We believe in these wild places and are excited to share them with folks. In that way, we try our best to like educate folks on who used to live in these river corridors, who currently lives there, about the fire ecology of the area, or how that kind of plays into the whole ecosystem of the river. River guides are masters of fun. What we do is arguably a super fun job. And we know how to, take 2 ammo cans and a throw bag and put 2 people ammo cans, and then they have a game of tug of war off the ammo cans, and that's called Wrath on a Can. Like, we can take a stick and then all of a sudden you have an entertaining game that lasts for hours, right? Like, we know how to make fun out of literally nothing. Folks say that river guides are professional movers. So, right, if you're going 100 miles and you're staying at a new camp every single night downstream, that's how rivers work. You go downstream, you can't go back up. Every single day that you're getting to camp, you're setting up camp again, right? So you're just constantly picking up heavy things and then setting them back down. And then you pick them up again and then you set them back down again. There's a photo of me working down in the Grand Canyon. You can see these giant boats that we pack full of gear every morning. We strap everything down and then we push off the shore and we go downstream. So we're professional movers. We're manual laborers. We are general kind of fixers. We know how to like take that Chaco, that sandal, that shoe that breaks halfway through the trip, and we know how to stitch it back together so that the person whose shoe, that guest whose shoe that is, has something to wear for the rest of the trip. We know how to fix that patch, or we know how to put a patch on the hole on the bottom of our boats, right? We know how to fix our dories when we slam them into rocks, those types of things. We are enablers of success, right? Like, we want to see folks who are in an environment where maybe they're not as comfortable as we are. We want to see them succeed. We want to see them like have a really good vacation, right? There's a photo of me not working. I'm letting Austin, this and fantastic 13-year-old boy who was on one of my trips, row my boat, which was great by me because he was actually very good. And I could just sit there and kind of point, oh, you want to angle your boat a little bit this way, right? But it's about giving folks a chance to try something new. We're team players. We work really, really closely with our crew, our friends, and we rely really heavily upon each other. I don't know the last time you fell asleep 6 feet away from your coworker, and then you woke up and there they were, and you got to see them with their head and their stinky morning breath. But that's my job. Those are my people. We're problem solvers, right? We can thrive when the going gets tough. When it's 3 and it's still raining, we can figure out solutions. Obviously, we are lovers of the outdoor space, and we can get behind this kind of alternative lifestyle, this more sporadic working schedule, where we aren't in that kind of structured 9 to 5. Oh, and we're fantastic dressers who look really good in a multitude of different types of wigs. Guiding is not maybe what first comes to mind. Again, when you kind of had that image of a whitewater trip that you've been on, likely I was not what you kind of thought of, right? Maybe you pictured somebody who had more facial hair and was a man and super, super jacked and wasn't wearing a shirt. Those too, of course. But guiding is maybe not what you first expect. It's not that easy, it's a lot of fun, but it's a lot of work. And I kind of got into it on a whim and luckily it was a really good fit, but yeah, it definitely takes some consideration. Guiding is not for folks who prefer to work alone. It's a super communal work environment. And so, you have to be excited about working close with others. And it's not really for those who need a consistent domestic life. And when I say domestic, I mean domestic in the loosest terms ever. I don't have a dog because I wouldn't be able to take care of it for half of the year. I don't have a plant because I would not be able to take care of it for half of the year. Um, my housemates and I, we are currently, our living room is full of camping gear. We sit in camp chairs because we're all guides and we don't own sofas or coffee tables or rugs or TVs. Like we are camping indoors. It's so fun. It's, it's different. It's different from how a lot of folks live. So if you're somebody who needs to keep your sourdough starter alive, like guiding is challenging. So some of the best of the best moments. Last year I slept outside under the stars for probably close to 150 days, like easy, that's my office, that's my house, that's everything. I've definitely been the most physically healthy in my entire life once I started guiding, right? Again, professional movers, just the constantly picking up and putting down of heavy things, but also extremely emotionally healthy and mentally clear, right? Being away from your phone and having meaningful conversation and slowing down the pace a little bit, right? Those are all things that you get when you're living this type of work, which for me at least has created a really healthy self. Break. Yeah, I've mentioned a couple of times, but I work really closely with some of my closest friends, which is such a supportive environment to be a part of. It's really special. And I get to host folks' vacation. People are usually generally excited to be there, and to be able to help them with their designated time that they took with their families, right? To help them have a really good trip is such a special job to be a part of. A huge chunk of the year, the off season, you have to do it as you please. So I have a friend who lives part of her time in the US and part of her time in New Zealand, where she works as a guide over there. I have some friends who go down and surf in Baja for months in the fall because they can. You have this whole chunk of time that you can just do whatever you want with, which is really unique. It's super rewarding work. Again, maybe not what you would first expect, but there's a lot to learn from when working in these environments. And I know that it's made me way more aware of my impact on the earth as well, which is really cool. And it's arguably a really fun job. There's no denying it. It's really fun. But there's also really challenging times. So again, you're spending countless hours outdoors and the weather is sometimes hard. There's a photo of me wearing my 1, 2, 3, 4 hoods because it was cold out, and sometimes it's cold out. You'll have challenging guests and you have to spend the next 6 days with them. There's no escaping them. For part of the year, you're living out of your car, right? So the days that I'm not on the river, I am living out of my station wagon, which is, cramped and messy and small. Yeah, my summertime life is just kind of always sweaty and disorganized. I'm in a constant state of movement. So every year in the fall, I have to think about where I want to live. I have to find housing again. I have to think about a job for the winter. You're just constantly on the move and it's hard to ever really settle into a place. Again, with the off season, for a lot of guides, right? You go from being in a space where you're so yourself and you're so confident and you feel physically your best and mentally your best and you're with your friends and life feels glittery and beautiful and great. And then you get to the off season and all of that is taken away. And that can be a super hard thing to experience every single year. I work in the summertime, so I miss weddings all the time. And I have to say no to a lot of really fun trips because the summertime is my chance to make money and to work. And so you have to be good at like saying no to a lot of other really fun things. I don't have a home base, right? Um, which might sound like easy enough to say, but then once you start to get into the nitty gritty of it, it starts to get, it can be really rough, right? So like healthcare, right? Usually healthcare is associated with your job, connected to your job. And if you don't have your healthcare through your job, then it's likely through your state. If you don't have a address, if you don't have a home base where you get healthcare, right? Like who's your dentist? Who's your gynecologist? Um, Filing taxes is like painful. I work in all these different states every single year. And again, they're like, where do you live? And you're like, if one more person asks me where I live, I'm going to start crying. And like, like feels like every time somebody asks you that, it's like a whole, opens up this giant can of worms. Like, I don't have a home base. I'm just floating. And, it's like a thing. Car insurance, right? Like everything that you need to put an address on is like, oh, horrible. Getting a loan, right? Like it's a lot. It's a lot of work. And then just like a general public lack of understanding, right? Folks don't understand that your job is a real job, or that your lifestyle is a real way that people choose to live. I was on a trip where it was like day like 4, we're like halfway through the trip, and I'm like rowing this family downstream, and the dad is like middle-aged man, he turns back to me and he says, so when are you going to get a real job? And I was like, I'm like smile, and I'm like, oh, this is my real job. And he's like, no, I mean like a real job, like one where you have to set an alarm. And I was like, who do you think made your coffee for you this morning? Like, I have an alarm. I let's not talk anymore. It's like there's such a disconnect, right? People don't understand why you live in a different place every winter, or that in their eyes, sometimes you don't work a real job. And that can be a really like exhausting thing to convince people of all the time. And, I don't say these things to like scare you off or like make it sound terrible and horrible and like guiding's no fun, because it's a lot of fun, but it's also not all like glittery all the time. It takes some figuring out, which, all of those problems, all of those kind of issues can be figured out, right? So say you're somebody who really wants to have a dog, but you also want a guide. Maybe you volunteer to watch your, brother and sister-in-law's tiny yappy dog whenever go on a trip. Maybe you foster a dog. Say like I have such a strong support system in Cincinnati, and like my address is like my family's addresses, and that makes a really big difference for me. They they enable me to do what I want to do. So there's always ways to figure it out, right? There's always ways to like make this lifestyle happen. But I think the biggest thing, the further into guiding I've gotten, is knowing that like life is all the spaces in between those super high highs and those like super low lows. And that it's about like figuring out a balance. Like how can you make seasonal work, right? Whether it's being a river guide, or if it's being an Uber driver, or if it's a ski patroller, or if it's, any other sort of like gig work, short-term work you can do. Like, how do you make that lifestyle work? Because guiding at the end of the day is only for a certain chunk of the year, and you got to fill those winter months. And so for me, I've tried a couple of different things in my almost 8 years now, 7 years of having this. Well, I guess my entire life I've been a little seasonal because of college. Anyways, I've done a lot. So those first couple of years after guiding, I traveled abroad. I lived in New Zealand for 6 months, where I was doing like work exchanges. So for most of you probably know what that is, or maybe have even done some yourself. But for those of you who don't know, work exchange is where you live at somebody's home or work on somebody's property in exchange for room and board. So I did that in New Zealand for about 6 months. I did that while I was in Latin America for about 4 months, living in hostels, doing work exchange. I've done like the short-term work. I've like just tried to get whatever job I could for 4 months out of the year. That can look like serving. That can look like working for Amazon or USPS or FedEx during the holiday season. The past couple of years, I was house sitting and embracing the less is more move. My partner and I, we were living in like top Idaho, like basically Canada, kind of middle of nowhere. Like we were like 25 minutes away from the closest town of like 2,000 people. So we were pretty isolated, and we drank a lot of coffee and played a lot of cribbage and read a lot of books, and like, just tried to really settle into the winter. But more recently, I have found that like leaning into my small business has been the way for me to feel fulfilled in the off season, right? So getting my creative fill. So I make leather goods. I make like wallets. I make bags. I make cribbage boards, travel size cribbage boards. I make a whole bunch of different creative this and that's. And I found that like leaning into my creative side has really helped me feel fulfilled in the winter. And then I can feel fulfilled in my guiding work in the summertime. So finding what's best for you is the key to being a like happy and healthy seasonal worker. Here's my plug. You can check me out at smallorygoods.com. If you want 15% off of your order, use code TNN15. I'm going to get that set up tonight or tomorrow. I'm also doing like a big spring sale right now because river season's right around the corner, and I need to sell some of my stuff because I don't want to put it all into a storage unit because it's almost that time of year. So head on over and take a look. All right. So some different companies that you can look into. There are so many different river companies out there, so many different tourist guiding kind of focused companies. I work for Oars. And what's cool is that Oars offers, along with ARTA and NOC, they offer guide school. So you can actually like sign up to learn the skills that you need to have to be a guide. They also offer scholarships for folks who are kind of new to that whole scene and trying to break in. There's some really cool like youth and student focused companies out there. So Grand Canyon Youth is one where they take like high school students and middle school students, I think, down the Grand Canyon and like the San Juan, a couple other desert boating stretches. And if you've never heard of Outward Bound, they're super cool youth program, summer program for high school kids. And they do more than just river trips. They do a bunch of different types of outdoor trips for young folks. And then get involved in your university. If you're a student or if you live in a college town, find out if there's an outdoor program and be a part of it and convince them to go on a river trip. If you're looking to get your feet wet first, you can check out these multi-day trips in the like Northwest, Pacific North, and Idaho. Obviously, huge spot for running multi-day trips. Oregon's also really big. In the desert, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, all really good areas with lots of river stretches. And if you're ever up in Alaska and you have the chance to do a trip up there, definitely look into it. I'm not even going to talk about trips outside the US because every country has, not every country, but a lot of countries have trips that you can look into. River trips come in all different shapes and sizes, so likely there's something near you. So yeah, to get started, I think it's important to remember back on that first slide, the girl holding the chicken with the second place ribbon, because my outdoor experience, right, quote unquote outdoor experience, was minimal when I started this job. And I also think that like being an outdoorsy person is a vague term, and like everybody's outdoorsy in their own way, right? Like you don't have to, if you're already like, oh, I'm not outdoorsy enough to do your job, like then you're already telling yourself the wrong story. If you want to do this, if this is something you have thought about, if this is a lifestyle you've thought about, then you should strongly consider doing it, right? Figure out a way to make it work for you. So as far as getting into river guiding, you can get your wilderness first aid certificate or your wilderness first responder certificate. This is a outdoor medical training certification that you can get that looks really good if you are working in that industry. I kind of mentioned it before, but join a local outdoor program, your university's outdoor program. Take a course. I know like REI offers a bunch of really cool like outdoor kind of focused courses. So look into something like that. Or just like find some people who are maybe doing what you want to do and ask them if you can join on a trip, right? You don't have to know what you're doing. Like I didn't when I started, I didn't know at all. And people still liked me, which was great. You can just go on a trip, right? Like if you've never been on a river trip and you've thought this looks really fun, then you should go on a river trip. You should make that a priority. You should put your vacation time towards that because they are really fun. And if you want to work as a river guide and you go on a trip and you ask one of your guides about what it takes to be a guide and you like help out and you're engaging and you like try rowing their boat, say, you can come get a job with us, just apply. Like that's what it takes. I know a bunch of people who got their jobs as a guide by going on a trip. They started off as guests and they are guides. You can go to guide school. Mentioned that before. And then you can just apply, just reach out, try and have a conversation with a company and just give it a go. You know, you don't have anything to lose. Yeah. So hopefully you feel inspired to like think about the seasonal lifestyle, consider that type of work because it's really fun and it's a great way to live and it's very, very attainable if you just go for it. So yeah. Questions for me.
Yeah.
If you're a river guy, you better ask me a good question. If you're here.
Oh, we've got a lot. We've got a lot of questions lined up for you, Sarah. Awesome. Awesome. So first off, let's say, is it hard to get accepted in the Grand Canyon as a guide?
If you don't have any guiding experience, then yes, maybe so. But again, there's a lot of different ways to get on those trips, right? You can go as a guest, you can be an assistant on a trip, and kind of get your feet wet in that way. But there's a lot of different companies to work for, and lots of different types of Grand Canyon trips. So there's your traditional rafting trip where you're down there for like 16 days and you don't have a motor on your right. So that's like that type of trip that they run. And they also actually run trips where we're on really, really, really big rafts and they motor through all the flat stretches and through the rapids. So there's like different types of companies down there. So yeah, I wouldn't say it's any harder or any easier than anywhere else. It's just a different place and you just have to market yourself in a unique way, I guess.
Yeah. And similarly, so for someone with no experience, what is the training like for the job?
Again, it depends, right? Depends on the company that you work for. I can tell you my training was that I showed up in Idaho and we were on an all guides, so only guides trip on the main salmon. And I got to see these professional guides row their boats. I got to see them set up camp. I got to see them talk about that landscape, right? Like all of our educational talks that we give. So that was my training experience. It was kind of like on training trip. And then that entire first summer, I worked as a baggage boater. So I did not have paying guests in my boat personally. I only carried gear. And so that was my training experience. Some companies want you to go to guide school, which is something different, right? Those are all new folks learning together. So I'm sure it's very different for whichever company you work for.
Awesome. So, do you have to be a day guide first? Is it easier to get hired as a day guide? And then also, in addition, what is the best time of year to apply?
Totally. That's a good question. I would say in general, if you have day guiding experience, it will likely be easier for you to get hired as a multi-day guide. But I also know a bunch of folks who had different types of backgrounds, right? Like they went to school for like outdoor education, or they were outward bound instructors, or like, again, like myself, like no experience, right? I was good at people, which is also a real thing, but to me it felt pretty benign, I guess. So I would say that in general, yeah, any experience that you have is better than none, but none is not the end of the world. And so, yeah, if you like can get one summer working or a couple summers working as like a daily guide locally, and then you want to try and go towards like multi-day guiding or working the Grand Canyon, like that experience is better than none. As far as like when to apply, um, I would say the best time to apply is probably like February time, January, February, March. That it seems like most companies are trying to know all of the guides that they're going to have working for them before the season starts. And so, yeah, like winter is probably the best time to apply. Winter, spring would be my
Cool.
guess. Yeah.
I think I did see Oris had posted about this presentation and they said they're hiring.
There you
So
go.
company, if
Yeah.
anyone's interested. We've got a question. Any any guiding colleagues who are older or retired, and is there an age limit?
Dude, I love this question. Okay. I don't care how old you are, you could be a river guide. Yeah, there's lots of folks. There are lots of folks who start later in life or work into later in life, right? Like I know a bunch of guides who like have been guides for like 40 years, you know? And I know some folks who, so I, one of our guiding friends, her name's also Sarah. She's a teacher, which was why I mentioned teachers earlier. She's a teacher and she got into guiding. You know, she's probably in her like, oh gosh, I shouldn't even say because I don't want to offend her, but like probably like in her like 40s or so, late 30s, early 40s. And she got into guiding at that point in her life, right? Because she wanted to, and her lifestyle, her job allowed for her to have her summers off. Um, One of our buddies, friends, Morris, he was a professor at a university. And it had kind of crazy life thing happen to him, had a traumatic brain injury, and had to step away from teaching, being a professor. And then he came on a trip as a knowledgeable person of that river corridor. He's an anthropologist, archaeologist. Um, Anyways, he knew a lot about the Snake River, and he came on as a person of knowledge, and then he became a guide. He was like, I don't want, I don't want to be a professor anyways, like I'm just going to come work as a river guide. And he was like 60, like like there's no cap, there's no cap on it.
I love that. And it's like open for all wakes of life. Anybody that
Yeah.
wants to retire from a crappy job that you're over, you can segue
Yeah.
into this.
Yeah.
Some questions were like, where are the majority of the other guides from? Like, where do they hail
Oh
from?
gosh, everywhere. My one of my really good friends, Dan, is from Pennsylvania. My partner Carrie is from Colorado. I know a handful of people from Colorado. Um, know some people from New Mexico, Montana, Oregon. Like I mean, obviously there's a lot of people. There's a lot of people from the western part of the country. Rachel's from Virginia. I know a lot of folks who are from the East Coast, Midwest area as well. So kind of everywhere.
So typically like United States, though.
Typically United States. Yes, yes. I don't know if I personally know a lot of folks who are from other countries and then come and work in the US in the summertime. I do know American guides who work in the US in the summertime and then go abroad and work the other hemisphere in the winter time. So I
Yeah.
assume there's probably international guides who do the same thing in the US, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I was actually curious about that. So obviously you're working seasonally for the summer, but do a lot of the guides travel south for the off season so they can continue doing river trips like any in other parts of the world?
Yeah, I definitely know a handful of folks who do that. Me personally, I don't know, my body I think would be like, no more. But there are definitely some folks who chase the never ending summer and guide year round.
I love that. The never-ending summer.
Yeah.
Good, good quote. Do you have any suggestions for where to get a WFA certificate?
Um, um, you can do a quick internet search. There's a couple different companies that offer those certifications.
So it's not just one company, it's like you
No.
could okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yep.
How much can a guide expect to be paid?
Again, it varies company by company. Typically, the pay scale is set up as a daily rate, not hourly or salary that you see in a traditional 9 to 5 job, right? Because think about and break it down if we were paid hourly, right? We're on the clock 24 hours a day for 6 days straight. So typically we're paid daily and we receive tips at the end of a trip. Um, Again, it depends on where you are. Some companies don't pay first year guides at all. And some companies will have a starting pay of $120 a day. And then that can go up to, you know, seasoned guides, senior guides can go up to like 250 a day. And then split tips from there. So it's a scale, and seniority obviously does matter. And also some companies pay more depending on if you're leading the trip or if you are driving a specific, if you're driving a specific type of watercraft, one of the specific boats, or if you have your swift water certification, you may get paid more. If you have your woofer, your WFR search, you may get paid more, right? So every company is a little different. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, fair. So like in terms of equipment that you would need to purchase, how much of it is your own and what does your company supply?
Yeah. That's such a good question because that was a huge concern for me when I started, right? Like I went out to Idaho and I didn't have a sleeping bag. Like I didn't have a tent, like I didn't have anything. And I was like, oh gosh, what am I gonna live in all summer long? And my company was great. They like let me borrow all of that gear until I was able to um, get my own. So, again, it varies, but um, there's a lot of the gear that you do need to have your own, right? Like clothing, like obviously, like once you can get to that point, sleeping bag, tent, sleeping pad, those are all important things to have. Your PFD, your personal flotation device, life jacket. You'll need one of those. You'll need a summer hat to keep the sun off your face. You'll need sunglasses, helmet, throw bag, river shoes. I'm just kind of spewing all the different things that we need. And if you do it long enough, right, you'll want to own these items. But if you're just getting started and maybe that's too much to buy all at once for a job, maybe your company or your friends can let you borrow something. And there's like, a really good like used outdoor gear scene, at least out west, which is great because you can get some of that stuff and not have to pay full price for it.
Yeah, I love those REI garage sales where you can
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
like half
That
off.
matters.
So what like if you can think of anything quickly, like what is your favorite gear you feel like you can't live without?
Ooh. I
If
mean, obviously my PFD is my favorite because it keeps me alive, which is very great.
fair.
Um, That's such a good question. My sun hat, I really like my sun hat. It's really nice. It's like nice and big and it like protects my face and it's like really sturdy. So I love that piece of gear. And my sun hoodie. I love sun hoodies. I love Free Fly. They're such a great company. They are this like, I think they're based out of Maine. They're this super small company that does bamboo clothing. So they're super soft and they have hoods and they're like lightweight and they keep me protected from the sun in the summertime. Um, and I think they're the best. So
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm sure that if anybody has any like specific questions about what you wear, what you like, you could always Instagram DM Sarah, right? That's cool to do. Okay.
oh yeah. I
Um,
might take a really long time to get back to you, but
or, if you want to drop your email or something,
yeah,
if people have
no,
some
I'm
questions.
super happy to answer. I'm so happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I love this stuff and love talking about it. So yeah,
We
absolutely. Ask
have
me
a
anything.
couple, we have a couple more questions though.
Okay.
Someone was wondering if they'd have some sort of advantage if they were on the rowing team in college.
Oh, maybe in the sense that you know how to row a boat, which is cool. Like, again, any experience is better than none, right? And like you already know how to use your body in that way, which is very cool. Um, uh, yeah, that's something that's like a really great place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, familiarity.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
do people do hammock tents on the river?
Um, where you are, right? So if you think of the desert, there's like not a lot of trees down there. So obviously you're not going to be able to hammock on like a lot of the Grand Canyon trips or San Juan trips or Cataract Canyon trips, right? If you're in the West, you maybe have a much better chance of finding a place where you can string up your hammock and sleep in it.
Cool. And then is becoming a guide in New Zealand, for instance, the same process as here in the US? I don't know if you can speak on that.
Um, yeah, again, I can't speak for like all companies in the US or all companies in New Zealand. I assume it's fairly similar. Again, I also don't know what it means to work internationally, right? That's probably like a whole nother process. Um, but like my friend who works, and I think she went through a pretty rigorous training period over there, which is, pretty cool. She like learned all these really incredible like whitewater skills and like was like cutting ropes and like practicing like going in after people and had like a lot of time running like big rapids. So different in that way. That was like a pretty full on training experience. But yeah, that's one person, one experience. So
Awesome. I feel like we've got time for like one other question if anybody has anything pressing. But I was kind of wondering, are you content where you are? Are there any other destinations you really want to guide in? Are you trying to go international at one point, or are you good?
um I personally um feel really good about where I am now and the spaces that I still have to grow as a guide here, right? Like you start as a newbie and then you get familiar in the skills and then you start to row different types of boats and then you start to lead trips and then you start to train folks and then you start to, so like I'm kind of over here where I'm excited to train folks and fill a more active role in that way and check out like more technical river stretches in Idaho. So yeah, I think I'm have a lot of space left to like grow here. And that's a cool feeling. As far as like working internationally, I don't know, maybe, I don't know.
You're open, of course.
Always.
Always. Well, thank you so much. Everyone give Sarah a virtual round of applause. Amazing presentation. And I'm so glad to hear a
Yeah.
lot more